Welcome to Resilience Plus Rise, the podcast where resilience is not just a concept, but a lived experience. I'm your host, Thomas Scaria, a resilience coach, an ultra marathoner, and a relentless believer in the human spirit's ability to rise. This podcast is a companion to my book, Resilience Plus Rise 26.2 Transformative Miles to Unleash Your Marathon of Life Mindset. Each episode is a raw, unfiltered dive into the stories of those who have faced life's hardest battle and emerged stronger, and who believe the battle still continues. Today, I have the privilege of talking to such a human. Remember, I mentioned the human spirit's ability to rise, a believer who have faced life's hardest battles. Welcoming Shalina Lodhia. So before we can get into the conversation itself, a small snippet about Shalina. She's a counselor, she's a criminologist, and she's a musician. Her goal is dedicated to supporting those impacted by domestic violence, intergenerational trauma, narcissist abuse, abortion grief, or even the sexual assault. She's committed to the thought leadership and regularly shares insight on mental health and social issues on social media. I can go on and on about this amazing personality called Shalina, but let's directly jump into the conversation. Shalina, welcome to Resilience Plus Rise, the podcast.
Oh, hi, what a intro. That's amazing. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm ready to share things that might help your audience. And
fantastic. And guys, Shalina comes from, for the North Americans, she comes from down under. She comes from Australia. She's in the beautiful space of Sydney, and she has agreed to come for this particular podcast. Shalina, in my podcast, time and again, there's a statement which I hold very dear to me because it is about resilience. People that life has thrown down, pushed you under the ground, but you dust off, look back at life and say, life on my terms, not on your terms. And Shalina, I think so. You have been an epitome for that, whether it is through your music, whether it is through the counseling, whether it is through the social media that you put the information across. You have been very much strong, very much vehement about what you stand for. But there's a statement that I say, which is very close to me. It's some from Rumi, is that from our deepest of wounds comes our deepest of purpose.
yeah,
From our deepest of wounds shines the brightest of light. So what has been that wound? What has been that has made Shalina this person to stand tall and say, listen?
I think a lot of my trauma has intersected since I was a child. A lot of experiences have intersected. Ever since I was a child, like a 15-month-old baby. Since then, my mom had to leave my father overnight because there was domestic violence, and there was immigration abuse, there was financial abuse, there was emotional abuse, and then he almost killed her. And then the next day, he never thought my mom was going to leave him. So I think he thought that he could get away with bad behavior. And he was also after his visa. So he got his visa 2 days after I was born. And he completely changed as a man towards me, towards my mom. And he wasn't much of a father. And he was abusive in many ways, physically as well, towards me, and in which my mom had to shelter me from that. And about I think my mum stayed, as a lot of women do, stay in relationships thinking that maybe he'll change, they'll improve, it won't be like this for long. She didn't want me to grow up without a father. So, you know, that level of tolerance was there until it kept getting worse and worse at home, you know, like he didn't want to pay for anything. He didn't want to, even my underwear, like children's underwears, shoes, he didn't want to buy any of that, and instead turned around and said to my mom, I'm not running a charity. And my mom's parents had to send clothes for me from overseas because they weren't living in the same country. And it kept getting worse, especially financially. And one night when they had a fight, an argument, he picked up the knife and was like, I'm gonna kill you. He put it to my mom's throat, and he also, you know, dragged her to my cot where I was sleeping, you know, making her swear over me that they're not going to fight and she's going to keep her mouth shut and never argue with him. And so he never thought my mom was going to leave. And then the next morning, my mom courageously, I was only 15 months, took me in her arms and was like, called my grandparents because they had come to Australia by then. And she said, I need to leave. You know, he tried to kill me, get me out of here. And overnight, her life changed. And as a result, I never had a dad in my life, even up until now. And I'm nearly 34. And the lawyers told her, give him access to see me. He refused. He didn't want to pay child support. He didn't particularly care. So because of all of that, I never saw him. I saw photos of him, but I never knew who he was. He was never around. He didn't want to be, because he got his visa, and that was the sole purpose of getting my mom pregnant, because he wanted to show the immigration office that I have children to look after. I've got a wife and a baby, but really it was for his piece of paper. So yeah, I didn't get to have a dad. So that already, since very little, that already impacted me, because everybody around me seemed to have fathers except me. But at the same time, this man could not have been in my life, because it would have been, if he had chosen to see me, I think it would have been pretty scary for my mom, because she would have been scared of what he might be capable of doing. Will he take me away? Because he used to make threats to my mom. I'm going to kidnap your daughter. I'm going to take her away. I'm going to take her to Malaysia. You're never going to see her again. So all that fear he put into my mom's heart. So she was very protective of me, very possessive and protective, because of my father and the threats that he made. And so it started from there. And I think as I grew up, I was always looking for that attention and the love from a man, from a father, but it never existed, and I never got it. And my mom was looking for, you know, to remarry and all that. But at that time, I think a lot of men, and I don't blame them, didn't want the responsibility of, you know, a 2-year-old little girl or a 3-year-old girl. So it was very hard for her to remarry and move on as well, because of my age, and also the trust factor. Like, how can you trust a man again? What if he does take advantage? These things happen. So there were those fears. But then when she did finally find a man, I was 11, and he actually sexually abused me. And yeah, and but I never told anybody about it. It was tough, because there was a lot of family drama. There was a lot of family politics happening at that time. And my mom was already going through abuse from her mom. So I knew that, because I had to grow up so fast as a child. I feel like I had to grow up really fast, because I was always very hyper vigilant and very sensitive to people's like emotions and how they were, because my family was just dysfunctional. I was living with my mom's parents and her brother, but everybody had their own trauma. Nobody went to therapy, because therapy is not a thing in my culture. I'm Indian. Therapy is just not a word. Some people don't think there's anything wrong with them. So it was already a world of dysfunction, just the way my family was and the way they interacted. And there was always a lot of fighting. And so as a result, I was very like closed off, because I didn't want to fight with anyone. I didn't know what to say. And so when this happened, I kept it to myself. I think I was in the 7th grade. And yeah, it was a very weird experience. I knew it was wrong, but there was nobody I could tell. So he got away with it. And they finally did break up like a year later. But in between that, he still would try, and I'd be like, no, I don't want anything to do with you. And he kind of did stop. But I usually found when my mom was in the shower was when he tried. And that's when I would run away because I didn't want any of that. So, yeah, I was in school, in high school at that time. So I would have been in the 7th grade. And then there was so much of like, I went through a lot of bullying and a lot of racism as well.
Mm-hmm.
School I went to was in a predominantly white area, and I was the only Indian. And this is the early 2000s. So, you know, it ruins your sense of identity. It like I hated being Indian because of the amount of racism and bullying I went through. And I kept thinking to myself, I wish I had a dad who could have protected me from this. I wish I had a father around. Maybe this would have happened. Maybe my life would have been different. Maybe I would have been in a different school. You know, I kept blaming not having a dad because of the situation I was in. And the teachers never did anything about it. You know, and it was every day, constant racism, constant bullying together, you know. And so that really, if your identity is already shattered, like mine was by not having a dad, and this further breaks you down because of how traumatic it was. And I didn't want to go to school, but I had to. I didn't have a choice. And this, like the bullying and the racism never actually stopped until I got kicked out of school, which was the best thing that ever happened to me. I got kicked out when I was 16 because I just didn't want to go to school. And then the principal was like, well, if you don't want to come, we don't want you here because you're not coming to school anyway. So that was probably the biggest blessing in disguise that ever happened to me, because I never had to face the bullies again. But over the years, it was constant. So I turned to self-harm as a way to cope with the pain of the bullying. And because once you get bullied and once there's so much racism, you end up hating yourself because you think there's something wrong with you, you know. And also because of my father not being around, I also already thought something was wrong with me. Like in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, well, I must not be worthy enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not enough for my dad. So I already felt like that. And it was further encouraged. The feeling was further encouraged by the racism and the bullying as well. So you just, all that confidence, all that self-worth was almost like non-existent. And even when your family like say like, oh, you know, like, don't worry about the bullies and like, you're good enough, you're not going to believe your family because you're going to think, well, that's their job. They're going to say that. Like, it's their job to say that, you know, like, why would you believe them? So that, yeah, it took many years to, I guess, build up my confidence. But it started when I left school, when I got kicked out. After that, when I lived a different, like I was away from school, is when my confidence started building again. But when I was 15, once again, I did go through sexual assault, people that I trusted, because I made friends online rather than in school, because in school I didn't have many friends because of the bullying and the racism. So I turned to online websites at that time. Facebook and Instagram didn't exist. We had other things at that time called Bebo. And so I made friends there. And I made some pretty good friends who I'm still friends with till this day. So it's not stranger danger, depending on who the person is on the other side of the line, of course. But in my case, the stranger danger did turn into danger. And so that was when I was 15. I was in the 10th grade. And I trusted two people, and they sexually assaulted me in an ordeal that lasted like hours. It wouldn't end. And after that, I went to school. Not school, sorry. I went to work because I was in so much shock. I was numb. I was in shock. I couldn't believe what had just happened. So I had to go to work and just pretend that it didn't happen, because I had nobody to tell at that point. I couldn't tell anybody. So I just kept it to myself. And yeah, and I was on school holidays at that time. And then I just, once again, I had to swallow it, get over it, go to school, pretend like it never happened. And I was, in Australia in the 10th grade, we study for what is called a school certificate. So once you do that, you can actually leave school after the 10th grade if you want to. So I was studying for that at the time. So I had to shift all my focus from that to this. And it was pretty hard, because you feel very alone in a world like that. And I didn't go to therapy or counseling like that. It wasn't like a thought in my mind, because you grow up in a family where therapy never existed. So it wasn't really like, I'm going to do something about it. And then, once I left school, once I got kicked out of school is when I started, I started studying at a college, and, life got a bit better after that. But I did end up in a few not so healthy relationships because I'm seeking the love from my dad that I never got.
Validation.
Sorry?
Validation.
Yeah. You look for validation, and I always look for validation in men. It's just a natural thing to do. I think I knew deep down what I was doing. I still did it anyway. And I still never really went to therapy about my dad, because I kept hoping that one day that pain would go away and I wouldn't feel it anymore. And then you realize it doesn't go away, and you actually have to do something about it. But I just thought it would go, and it didn't. So I turned to, smoking and drugs and alcohol. I did all that to numb the pain, but from all the trauma, but it doesn't help. It's temporary fix, and then you're back to square one again. And so that's pretty much where all my trauma stuff since a child to adolescent.
And thank you for sharing that. And I'm deeply sorry about what you had to go through. But again, as I mentioned, sometimes it's a pain that teaches you to be a beacon for others, because unfortunately you have to go through it, but you can shine on somebody else.
Yeah.
When that part happened, but when was the time wherein you, as I mentioned earlier, is that you look back at life and say that life by my terms? So where was that pivot point that started making a change within your own self, and you said that now here comes Shalina, who is getting to be a little more stronger, a little more wiser, and a little more bolder?
I would say that shift came about maybe 6-7 years ago. Pretty recent. It was more recent. In my 20s, I didn't really address many of the issues. I mean, I did heal from the abuse. I did heal from that, but my main trauma point was not having a dad. Okay. That for me has always been the heaviest trauma, because it's something that, you come from a man and a woman, you inherently crave that. And until the day I die, I'm never going to get that. And I know that. So that's been the hardest thing to accept out of all my trauma. I moved past the bullying and the racism as well, because it's a reflection of those people and how they grew up. But all these things really I came to acceptance of, and it doesn't hurt me, was probably 5-6 years ago when I became sick of my own shit, which is what I tell my clients. I literally say to them that sometimes you have to become sick of your own crap to make a change. And I was sick of constantly blaming my dad for everything. I kept thinking to myself, maybe, one day the pain's going to go and I'm just going to be okay with everything that happened. And I thought I had to forgive him to be a good person, because forgiveness is always so encouraged. So I'm thinking I have to do that. And then once I realized that I actually don't have to forgive him in order to move on, I can move on without that. Like I can still hold him accountable for what he did, but I don't have to, I don't have to drink over him, and I don't have to operate from that lens. Everything I see doesn't have to be from the lens of not having a father. So it started from there. Then I went to therapy, and I think I went to a few. So it takes a while to find the right one. And then I saw this particular lady who I was venting to her about how I was feeling about not having a dad, especially because, you know, my father's remarried. He has a daughter. So I feel like he got to get away with it, get away with everything he did and start a brand new life with a wife and a daughter. But my mum and I, we suffered the effects of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lady, that particular psychologist was like, do you know it's not about you? And I was like, excuse me, what? Oh, like, what do you mean it's not about me? He did this to me. Like, what are you trying to say? And she was like, this is all, everything he did and his absence was a reflection of himself. And, you know, it was easy for him to disconnect from you as a baby because his intention was never there.
Mm-hmm.
He never intended to be a father. It was very easy for him to leave. So this was never about, his absence does not define your worth. It's got nothing to do with you. This is all to do with him. He must have been a traumatized person. Something's not right to make these decisions. It was not you. But that didn't hit me like it should have at that point, because I was angry, because in my mind, I'm thinking she's invalidating my pain. But really what she said made a lot of sense only a few years ago. And it's like, yeah, it's so true. The intention wasn't there. And what can I do? Like, if you just were here for the piece of paper, what am I supposed to do? I can't do anything. But so after that, my mindset about myself and how I felt about myself, after a while, it started to change, and I was coming to the acceptance of, well, yeah, his absence doesn't define my worth. His, you know, everything that happened to me doesn't define my worth. Like, you know, and I can't be a victim to my circumstances for the rest of my life, because if I'm a victim, then I'll never, you know, be able to, I won't ever see myself as a survivor, as somebody who can help other people, if I constantly am just like, oh, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim. So I don't look at myself like that, because I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be like that. Because I think that it takes away your power from you when you're just like, I'm a victim, I'm a victim. And that takes it away. It doesn't mean you're not a victim to what happened, but your identity should not be shaped on the victimhood, which identity was, because I kept, you know, saying, oh, but I don't have a dad. I'm a victim to not having a dad. And I'm a victim of abuse and racism and all of these things. And while I was, now it's like, okay, but what can I do that's proactive to, like, how can I be proactive about it? So that's why I'd studied criminology first, but I only started counseling just a few years ago after I healed. Otherwise, like, wouldn't be able to counsel people, right, if I haven't healed. So yeah, that's the reason I started doing it, to be able to, like, empower people and shift the mindset from victim to proactive. What can I do instead? Like, I can sit here and say I'm a victim to not having a dad, but instead I want to talk about the effects of not having a dad, so that if somebody ever chose to not, somebody's thinking, I don't want to be a father, they might think twice and be like, oh, maybe I should stay and be a father. Or somebody who's gone through bullying, like, how can I, you know, combat this? How can I stand up for somebody else who's going through bullying? Like this, it's to empower other people, you know. But that's how, I guess, my mind started changing. But it's a lot of conversations with myself in my mind, as we all do.
Of course, but when we are talking about the conversation in our mind, it can be both positive as well as negative, as well as it can be just, as you say, a lot of crap. But Shalina, I will pause our conversation over here before we can get into talking, or before I can get into talking to Shalina, the counselor, or the Shalina, the person who has got insights on mental health and parenting and social issues, how you help people in getting to that. So at this point of time, I will pause our conversation over here, and we will get into part 2, wherein we continue this conversation about what have you been doing to make the change in the world that Now that you have found a change within your own self, what else is happening? So with this, at this point, I'll say thank you for your space and time. Thank you, Shalina.
Thank